Frederick, the National Museum of Civil War Medicine in downtown Frederick. You're located at 48 East Patrick Street here in Frederick. And David Price is the executive director for the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. And again, David, thank you very much for your time. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. And thanks for doing what you do, because you and I talked a little bit. Frederick's a great community, and you're helping get the word out about all the cool things and great people that we have in here.
And kind of could you tell us a little bit about your background as we start, a little bit about your background, your job title, your position, and what you do specifically there at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine?
Yeah, well, if you wanted to really answer that question, we'd be here for 45 minutes about my background and how I ended up here. But in a nutshell, I grew up in the area, and anybody who did that, kind of had Civil War not ingrained in you, but you were driving by a lot of the sites that are in all the history books, and didn't really take it for granted, but always just kind of felt a part of it. But having said that, until I got a job here, I never came through the front door myself either, probably for the same reasons you did. You just kind of walked by and thought, I should go in there sometime, but didn't really do it. So I never judged locals harshly for not coming in here. But what I like to say is we see the locals when you have a relative from out of town come in, or you have friends from out of town and you're looking to give them something cool to do, or else get them out of your house for a couple hours. We're good at that. But during this time of COVID is really the time that we're seeing a lot more locals come in because people aren't traveling so far. And what's great about our museum, particularly in the Frederick aspect of it, it is a local story with national and international repercussions. We tell the story of Frederick during the Civil War. There's only about 8,000 residents, and overnight, several times, doubled in size, with more than 8,000 to 9,000 patients coming from the battles of Antietam, Gettysburg, Monocacy. We were just a central hospital location for many reasons. So a lot of the stories we tell are Frederick-centric. We're actually finally doing a walking tour tomorrow as we speak. We used to do them every weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, and now we're doing special events. So we've kind of changed the way we do business during this COVID thing, but we're still telling the Frederick story, and we're excited about the opportunity during this time that more locals will actually come in and learn about their own backyard. It's a cool story. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember, again, my first time, and I'll go back to my first time actually visiting the museum. And my first impression was walking through the front doors was just how well curated, how well organized, and the presentations were just awesome. The detail that was put into all the presentations, the exhibits, and the interaction was the biggest thing as well. Like we already talked about, with my kids, the first time bringing my kids there, I think their first impression was, we're going to another museum. They've been to museums in Greece, they've been to museums in Italy, Washington, D.C., and I think their impression was, another museum. But once we got them through the doors and everything like that, and they saw just the level of interaction, they're actually able to go up and in some cases, touch some of the exhibits, learn about, for example, horses. Well, how much grain does a horse eat during the Civil War period, that type of thing. They're actually able to touch those things and measure them out and that type of thing. They were really impressed. And again, to impress a 6, 8, 10-year-old, that type of thing, that's you're doing something right. So just really impressed my first time through the door, just the level of detail that your folks put into the exhibits.
Well, thanks. The museum's been around for 20 years. We're the #1 tourist attraction in downtown Frederick. We benefit from location because, downtown Frederick's so vibrant now with restaurants and other things to do. But I remember bad museums. So I did not form this, but I've been here, I guess, good grief, 8 years. So in the past couple of years, I've benefit from a fabulous young staff who comes in with great ideas, and we're small enough that usually I say yes before we say no. So to that end, we really want to engage people. First of all, you've got the topic, Civil War medicine. you know, why would I want to go in a building and learn about that? So we've turned that around, and that if people actually do step through that threshold through our double doors out here, they're going to be blown away by the topic and by the engagement that the story offers, because it's really a human story. It's a compassionate story. The preconceived notions of doctors hacking off legs and biting bullets is just not true, as you learned. And as far as the engagement of kids, I love the fact that our museum mixes old school with new school. We have mannequins, you hardly see that anymore. And our mannequins are not behind glass. So, you can really just stand next to them. And, there's a certain, I remember as a young kid going to these kinds of museums, and you're a little bit creeped out, but it intrigues you so much that, it becomes almost a physical experience. And I think that's a big part of how we can engage elementary school, middle school kids, and also parents too, because, once you start learning the story, you realize anything you thought about Civil War medicine is totally not true. It's just the opposite. It's really the beginning of the modern healthcare system. And, the stuff you're seeing play out today with the response to COVID, where they're setting up tents out in front of hospitals to do triage, to set up the Army Corps of Engineers going in and having two distinct plans, COVID and non-COVID temporary hospitals, converting hotels, converting convention centers to hospitals. All that stuff originated during the Civil War. So, you can see what I used to tell kids pre-COVID was, if you've ever been to a soccer game or a baseball game at your high school, and you see an ambulance or a first aid tent near the entrance to the stadium or the gymnasium, that's the Civil War medical system in place today. Right. That started in the Civil War, and it's because of echelons of care. First time they had to deal with tens of thousands of patients. I could go on and on, but and all of our staff is excited about the story, and our main impetus is to be relevant today. So we try to draw the line always from the past to the present, and then you throw in the fact that all this stuff happened in Frederick, and it's pretty cool. So during this time,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, so that's why, right now we're trying to get locals to come in. We've even started lesson plans for Frederick County public school teachers, and the payoff is going to be those kids who take that course or whatever will be able to get free admission because there won't be any big field trips, but they could come individually with their families and friends. So we're really focused on Frederick, especially in the next year or so.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you about that aspect a little bit later, but you already covered it. And I just want to highlight and amplify that, that's one of the main reasons why I brought my kids in initially earlier on in the year. This is pre-COVID, was to supplement their education. And the first time I went through was on Sunday. It was Sunday afternoon after church and everything like that. And I obviously knowing the educational aspect of your museum, it was okay. We've had an opportunity to do a little socialization earlier in the day, play a little soccer. Now let's go learn something before the end of the day. And that's what we did. We brought them in. And I think you have some sort of it's like a scavenger hunt type of setup for kids where they can actually go through each one of the exhibits, and there are certain questions, and they have to actively look for the answers and find out those answers, record them. And when they get through the entire museum and they get back to your counter, your customer service counter, they can turn those in for a small price. I forgot what it was, but they thoroughly enjoyed that. But they're having a good time. But they're learning about their history and learning about the Civil War and like you already mentioned before, a little bit about Frederick, a little bit more than they knew before. And I just thought that was a great aspect, and it certainly helped keep the kids engaged.
Yeah. Well, that's our goal. So I appreciate you doing it. And we're always trying. Some of the best times to come are when we have reenactors and living historians up in the conference. We've got we partner with a great group called the Blue and Gray Association that dresses up as surgeons from both sides, and they lay their tools all out, and families love it because you can actually have a conversation, with somebody who looks like they're from the era with cool stuff.
David, I also
one of the things.
I wanted to talk to you about if there's any group members or parents that are a little apprehensive about bringing their kids in, because let's be honest, the Civil War was a violent time. There's things that you can probably present to your kids. Some things you kind of have to shield them until they get a little bit older because they just don't understand. Now you add in the medical aspect of it, where there's some procedures that are just archaic. Like you mentioned before, they've progressed and evolved over time. But the Civil War helped evolve those procedures over time. What would you say to parents that think, hey, this may be a little bit too much for them right now in terms of age?
Number one, it's really all ages, and I'll tell you why. Because you're not tall enough until you get to the third or fourth grade to really see the one exhibit that kind of like might skeeve you out, and that's the amputations, which is not horrible. But, and that's why our field trips are mostly fourth graders and eighth graders. So if you're under that fourth grade thing, you can steer away from. Really, that's the only one. Our most popular exhibit is really camp life, which was the most dangerous place in the war. 2/3 died of disease. So twice as many died of diseases like fevers and chickenpox and smallpox and typhoid and dysentery and diarrhea rather than bullets. That exhibit is really a replication of a campsite. So it's yet another kind of experience. It's really engaging. I just told you some really horrific numbers and gross things, dying of diarrhea, but you'd never know it if you were in, second, third grade. You'd just see a cool campsite there. So, I didn't design these exhibits, but I am thrilled to have been able to take over those things, because I think they did a great job of engaging at different levels for appropriate audiences. But realistically, the younger they are, the less interested they'll be up until like fourth grade. Because you can follow the story of Pele Bradford through here, who was a young man who enlisted, got the measles, experienced all the things we talked about. So there's different levels of engagement. We got some people who spend 2 hours because they read every word. And others come in and have a great experience in 45 minutes. It's 10,000 square feet, which is larger than you think when you see the entrance of the building, and it's 2 floors, about 9 or 10 galleries. So you can kind of gauge your own level of engagement.
Sure. And David, you just mentioned a great segue here. You just mentioned the building itself. The building is very interesting, has an interesting past and history. Can you just run us down just real quick on the history of your current location?
Yeah, I'm sitting in the most haunted building in Frederick. So if you've ever taken one of the great ghost tours here in town, which I highly recommend as well, you'll stand in the street right in front of Beans and Bagels, and you'll stare up at my office here on the 3rd floor, and you'll hear all these wonderful tales of interesting stories that happen. I can definitely say strange things happen up here. We do Halloween tours and bring people up to the 3rd floor because that's where most of the things happen. I'm of the opinion that my cousin said it best. He said, David, the Bible's very clear on that topic. It exists and you don't mess with it. And that's kind of the approach I take. And, we've all heard noises. The big thing that we hear in here are little kids running around and nobody's in the building. And it goes on from there. But my thought is this was a furniture store way back in the day. And war breaks out. So what's a way to make a little extra money? You have the raw materials and the tools to then build caskets. So you start to build caskets, and then to make a little more money, you hire an embalmer to come in and embalm bodies. So this was actually an embalming station for General Hospital Number 1 here in Frederick during the Civil War. So in the basement, there were bodies embalmed. It was also a funeral home. So I actually had Mrs. Randall who grew up here, as did George Delaplane. His mother was born right here in my office.
Wow.
And so and George Delaplane of the Delaplane Foundation, of the Delaplane Visual Arts Center, used to own the Frederick News Post. And they would tell stories about how they would go down in the middle of the night and trip over a body because it was a funeral home. And back in the day, they would drop the bodies off at night. Jumping back to the embalming station in Civil War, the guy who was the embalmer is Dr. Richard Burr, and we have a mannequin of him. And any rule that was put in place in the Union Army to regulate embalming was usually a direct result of his bad behavior. So he was not a good guy, and he operated out of here. So those are kind of my theories on why this is probably the most haunted building in Frederick. But
now, David, there's a story that Mr. Burr used to conduct the embalming procedures right there in the first floor window, so passersby can actually look in and observe it. Is that true?
Yeah, what I like to tell people is if he was around when First Saturdays were happening, he'd be out there showing you the latest techniques and advertising his specialty. And yes, those stories are true. The guy, I mean, was he a genius marketer, or was he, just a little sick in the head? Probably a little bit of both. I don't know.
That's interesting. The one key thing you just mentioned that kind of stuck out to me was, possibly commonalities and similarities to what we're going through right now with COVID-19. The Civil War, major, national tragedy. You had the country at odds. And you saw in history that pivoted to another, skill set. And you've seen that a lot, back in February and March with a lot of our local businesses as well. You have a crisis, national crisis, health crisis, and you see a lot of businesses that have had to pivot to other things and to produce other products and perform other services. So I just want to highlight that too. Very, very interesting stuff. There's a lot of rumors out there on the internet, and in fact, I wanted to confirm that with you as well. There's a few websites out there that kind of go into a little bit more detail on Burr and some of his activities during the Civil War. Very, very interesting stuff. So we talked about the building a little bit here. Can you paint just kind of a general picture of Frederick, of downtown Frederick during the Civil War? One of the questions I had was, is it true that we talked about the soldiers that were brought in, the casualties that were brought in, and the fact that they were embalmed right there in that facility? Was there a railroad, or were there railroad tracks closer to where you are right now? So let's say casualties came in from Gettysburg, out of Gettysburg or Antietam. Was Frederick kind of a crossroads where they were able to logistically bring in those casualties, prepare them, and then put them back on the train and send them back out to wherever they were heading? Is that kind of close to the truth, or?
Yeah, 100%. And if we like to say Frederick is one vast hospital, but we are not the only ones that can claim that moniker by any means. You had Memphis that was one vast hospital. If you were a city, Richmond was one vast hospital. If you were a city that was on a river, or a city that had a railroad track, that's where they were taking the patients at some level of care, because of the reasons you're describing. Because you get, like I mentioned, Antietam, Gettysburg, Battle of Monocacy, South Mountain. These guys walked here, injured. I'm talking about the wounded. Walked here, but also ambulances and 25-mile trains sometimes, hundreds at a time, brought patients to this city. And it's because 27 buildings were taken over as hospitals. We had lots of large buildings, churches, schools, and they were made into hospitals by the Union Army to care for them, to get them stable enough to then move them to the bigger cities, to Washington, D.C., to Philadelphia. And they would then make it to the pavilion hospitals and larger permanent hospitals, which were a part of the system. Once you made it there in the Civil War, you had a 92% chance of survival. So the system worked. They finally had first aid stations, then they would take them to a field dressing station, and then they would bring them to a city like Frederick, and then they would move them on to the permanent hospitals to either finally get them back in shape and send them back to the units, or they'd be released to go home. But that big statistic of 92%, goes against what everybody thinks.
So
and it was because of the railhead and the roads. The roads were good.
Gotcha. Yep. I've had the opportunity. I love Civil War history, so I've had the opportunity. The one thing I like about Frederick, Maryland, is the close proximity to number one Gettysburg, about 30 minutes away, and Antietam. I had an opportunity to go to both there, and when I lived in other states, I've had the opportunity. Any opportunity I've had to stop by and visit a Civil War fort, or you name it, I've taken that. So just one of the really impressive things about Frederick, just the history here. And like you mentioned before, the close proximity to some of the major battles. David, you mentioned some of the activities, some of the walking tours that are coming up, and that's one of the main things I wanted to help highlight and amplify. You have a walking tour, I believe it's tomorrow, isn't it? Is it called One Vast Hospital Civil War Walking Tour in Downtown Frederick? Can you maybe give us a little more detail on that?
Yeah, in normal times, we would be doing this every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday, and they're usually pay what you please. They're always free to members. Our memberships are pretty affordable, $35, I think. But it's about a 45-minute tour, and we actually have a self-guided little booklet for like $3 that you can get, where we did little YouTube videos that take you inside, so you can do it on your own too. It's really worth the $3. Wow. And it 45 minutes to an hour. We walk you around, show you the different buildings that were used as hospitals, and tell you a lot of stories about Frederick and generalized things, but a lot of specific quotes from people who were either patients here or caregivers here. And one thing I like to say is, Frederick has a history of welcoming people and being a nice town, and that's what happened when these guys came in who were wounded. So most of the stories that we're telling, are about compassion and people helping people, and it's not the doom and gloom that the word Civil War medicine people often think of. We've also got a couple cool things coming up. As normalcy returns, hopefully, we'll do more and more walking tours. But you can find out that information always on our Facebook page and on our website, which is civilwarmed.org. I like to say it looks like Civil War Ed, but it's Civil War and Med for medicine.org. And we've got a lot of great videos and things, just like you're doing here. So if you're stuck doing virtual learning, we've got a lot of programs and cool talks on there as well. We are planning on partnering with the escape room, Sherlocked Inn. Sherlock Escape Rooms, Chris over there, to do a temporary escape room in our conference room that families will be able to do. It'll be like a 30-minute adventure based on Antietam and Clara Barton, and it'll be a sneaky way to teach your kids about history and a cool, fun activity. So we're always trying to get out of the box. So yeah, always check our website, because we're always trying to get living historians, do something fun, and walking tours with different things.
Absolutely. And in fact, I was on your website probably about two days ago, right before going to bed, and had an opportunity to just kind of see what you're offering. And my kids are excited about taking part in a few of those things as well. Just really, really good stuff. And I think I'm slowly turning into my kids into history buffs as well. And you guys playing a huge part in that. David, I appreciate the information that you presented here. Like I said before, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of speak to, number one, the museum, remind folks in Frederick County that you guys are certainly there. There's a lot of information, and like I mentioned before, you guys are a treasure right here. I mean, smack dab in the middle of downtown Frederick, and folks really do need to go by, stop in, and take advantage of the history, take advantage of the education that's there, the exhibits, which are just first rate. And we appreciate your time. David, before we head off here and close this out, are there any additional offerings that you didn't mention before that you guys are presenting to the local community? Any other activities or any final words for folks that are tuning in?
Just check our website. We're like I said, we're always trying to do new fun things, and come see us. And if you have relatives that come in from out of town during the holidays, we'll take them off your hands. Just send them to us. We'll keep them busy for 2 hours and keep them out of your hair. But no, really, thanks for highlighting us, and keep up the good work. And like they say, we'll all get through this together. And downtown Frederick's a great place to be quarantined. So.
Absolutely, and by all means, folks that do go through there, if they, like you mentioned before, if they happen to notice some things that are a little off while they're in the building, they're going to go to the website and share those experiences. But more importantly, I hope they go in and learn a little bit about our nation's history, about the Civil War and Civil War medicine specifically. David, thank you very much for your time. I know you're a busy man. Thank you for taking out time to talk to Frederick Unplugged for a little bit here. And have a safe weekend and a successful weekend as well with your walking tours. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. Thanks again. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Good.